Again, and this is our last class for this afternoon. We're going to be talking about the woman known as the Syrophoenician Woman, and she's also known as the Canaanite Woman. And I'll get more into that in just a moment. She's a woman of tremendous faith. She's a woman who kind of pushes through to get to Jesus and have a conversation with Jesus, and even as she's in the conversation, pushes through to have an even closer conversation with Jesus and a more direct conversation with Jesus. And you can see the faith that she had, and Jesus recognizes that faith and notes the faith that she has in him. And I'm subtitling this lesson today, Ain't Too Proud to Beg. Yeah. It's a good song. I knew you'd like that. Ain't too proud to beg. Which, that's kind of the story of this woman. She wasn't too proud to ask for a crumb. And because of that, she was, her request was answered. So, if there's ever been a time in the Gospels where the comments of Jesus with a woman were questioned and scrutinized, this is the text. This is the place here. It is the time that he spoke to this woman from the region of Tyre and Sidon, just the moniker Syrophoenician woman or Canaanite woman. It's the one time that he ventures outside of the borders of Israel or Judah, Palestine, however you want to term it, to go north into a territory that was non-Jewish and was not a part of Israel, had never been a part of ancient Israel, Tyre and Sidon. And so in the story here, he is talking to a woman who is foreign to the nation of Israel, a foreigner. She is not of the tribe of Israel, of the people of Israel, of the ethnicity of the Jews. She wasn't. And so thus we come to the last woman. We talked about two widows, two anointings, and one foreign person. And this is the foreign person, this woman who is the Syrophoenician woman. So I will start this class with an applicable joke. Be careful, because if you have to tell people you're telling a joke, then it's probably not very funny. Okay, and I know that. So here we go. A college student takes a biology class. He has some reservations when he heard the course was tough, but he pushes through and takes the class. He recognizes that his teacher is very difficult, but he signs up. He's a part of the class. And after 1 week and one chapter, the professor gives a test for the class. He passes out a sheet of paper, the professor does. It's divided into squares. And in each square, he gives the drawing of particular legs from birds. And he says, identify the bird from the leg. And this guy is pretty stunned. The student's pretty stunned. He didn't have a clue this type of test was coming. And so he sits there and he just stares at the legs of these birds. It gets angrier and angrier at the professor. And he finally just reaches the boiling point, and he goes up to the professor, plops the unmarked test, undone test on his desk, and he says, you know what, this is the worst test I've ever seen. This is the dumbest course I've ever taken. I'm not doing this. And the teacher says, well, young man, you just flunked. Okay? You're not going to withdraw. You're not going to withdraw passing. I'm just going to flunk you. You have flunked. And he picked up the paper, the professor did, and he saw that the guy had not put his name on the test. And so the professor says, by the way, what is your name? And he pulls up his pant leg and he says, you tell me. You're welcome. All right, so now, how, Steve, are you going to apply that story? Mike Tolliver taught me, I was trained by Mike Tolliver. He used to, he could make any story applicable. It didn't matter, he would tell these funny things, and you'd be just sitting there, okay, Mike, what's the point of that? And he would make it into a point. Well, here's the thing. Life is often a test. Boom! There you go. Life is often a test. It is. And the tests that we face in life show us what we're made out of. And what I see here going on in the story of the Syrophoenician woman is a test. This is a test for the woman. Some say that Jesus insulted her. Some say that Jesus was rude to her. I don't see that going on at all because I know the character of Jesus. He was not insulting and he was not rude. Jesus was testing her. He wanted to see what she was made of. Okay, you want this? Do you really want it? And so he pushed her a bit and he tested her. But isn't that true of life? Life is always a test. Okay, Matthew chapter 15, we see this story. It begins in verse 21. It says, Jesus left there and went into the area of Tyre and Sidon. I don't know, do we hit the slide? Let's see if this actually came out or not. No, one more. Oh, there we are. Boom. Okay. So this is Tyre and Sidon in the middle of the map. You look just below it there is Jerusalem. You see the border of Israel, which would have been the same in the first century. That is the first century border. You see the north of it, that's the country that we call Lebanon today, along the, someone from Lebanon here, best Middle Eastern food in the world, from Lebanon. And so I was in Egypt once, and they took me to eat Middle Eastern. We went to a Lebanese restaurant. That's, yeah, so anyway, I digress. It's the end of the day. Come on. But Tyre and Sidon both are coastal cities, and this is where Jesus would have gone. His only excursion out of the border that we know in the first century was Israel. He goes to the north here, and while he's here, this happens here. A Canaanite woman, so she's from Tyre and Sidon, and also sometimes identified as the Canaanite woman because she was not Jewish, from that region came to him crying, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." Interesting title she gives him, the Son of David. You are the king. You're the son of King David. Goes on, but Jesus did not answer her. He spoke not a single word. His apprentices approached him, saying, "Send her away. She is constantly crying out after us." Jesus answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." The woman came to him and bowed down to him, saying, "Lord, help me." Jesus replied, "It is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." "Yes, Lord," she said, "but even the dogs eat the crumbs from the master's table." "Woman, your faith is great," Jesus answered. "What you wish will be done." Her daughter was healed at that hour. So I have three lessons that I want to draw from this story here. And also after the first point, I'm going to have someone come and share for us about this story. So my first lesson is this woman was perceptive. She was perceptive. She knew where to go to get help. She was even perceptive enough to say to Jesus, "Son of David," and to use words which were biblical words. "Have mercy on me." And so that's not a part of her culture. That's not a part of her upbringing. But you can see that she studied Jesus enough to know that. And so this healer comes from the south to the north, and she hears about him coming, and she gets to know some things about him, which is great. She's doing her homework. That's fantastic. And I think it shows the kind of intellect she had. It shows the kind of heart she had. It also shows a bit of the desperation that she felt, that she was willing to do all that. And here comes a healer. He's Jewish. He's not Canaanite. I need to learn some things here. I need to make sure that I don't offend him. I need to make sure that I say the right things here. And so this idea of have mercy on me, that's a very, very, very Jewish, very Hebrew, very Old Testament idea of getting into the graces of God. And then Son of David. I mean, that's the title of the Messiah, the King. And so she learns these things and she approaches him. And it shows that she was desperate, but also she was smart. She was a good learner. She didn't want to offend. She just wanted help. And in order to get help, she would study and she would learn and she would do whatever she needed to in order to get that help. I had an opportunity once while we were living in Jerusalem to visit on the Temple Mount. It is controlled by actually the country of Jordan. The Temple Mount is controlled by the country of Jordan, and the sheikh who's in control of the temple is from Jordan. And so the Muslims control the top of the Temple Mount today. It's where the Al-Aqsa Mosque is, and it's where the Dome of the Rock is. So it's actually the third most holy site in all of Islam. And when you go to back when we were there, you could actually go there and you could, anyone could go up and look at it. Now it's closed except to Muslims or to special honored people, guests. And so you're not able to go up there anymore, but we could go up there. We would look around. We could go into the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And in my reading, just doing archaeology, I found out that underneath the dome of, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is the third holiest site in all of Islam, there are steps and there are columns and there's pavement that goes back to the time of Jesus. And it's the same pavement that would have been used to enter the Temple Mount. So it's the very, very pavement that Jesus would have walked up to get into the Temple Mount. And I thought, I got to see that. I got to experience that. And so, but it was closed because it's the women's side of the mosque. And so it's closed to men, and it's especially closed to men who are not Muslim. And so I just thought, okay, I got to figure this out. And so I started studying it, and I learned enough terminology to know what would offend and what would not offend. When the Crusaders went in to this part of the temple, actually it wasn't a temple, it was a mosque at the time, but when they went in, they made the Al-Aqsa Mosque, this holy site of Islam, into a stable. How offensive is that? They turned it into a stable. And they actually took pillars that went back to the 1st century, and they carved holes in them to tie up and tether their horses in these pillars, and the whole place became full of manure back in the time of the Crusaders, and they called it Solomon's Stables. That was their name for it, Solomon's Stables. And so I figured I don't go in there asking, can I see Solomon's Stables? Because that's going to offend anyone that I talk to. I just don't do that. Instead, I learned that the term that's used is El Marwabe. That's where the women go and they pray. And so I learned enough words to, marhaba, to say hello, to tell them that I wanted to see El Marwabe. And I went to, anyway, I got like a dozen no's. No. And I kept saying, can I talk to someone else? Yeah, go talk to him. No, go talk to him. No. And then finally I just said, can I talk to the sheikh who's in charge of all of this? And they said, you want to talk to him? And I said, yes, please. I said, I'm doing this, I'm an academic. I want to do this for academic reasons. That's the reason I want to go. I want to see it for myself. I've read about it, I want to see it for myself. And so I went and I met the sheikh. I met the guy in control of the whole Temple Mount. And he was sitting there and I said, Marhaba, and I was incredibly nervous. And I made sure I used all the right terms. He didn't say a word to me. He didn't say a word. He scribbled his name on the back of a note card and pushed it across the desk. And I picked it up and I ran to the entrance and I got in to see it. And very soon after that, they closed the whole of the Temple Mount to everyone outside who was not a practicing Muslim. But I got to see it. And the reason I got to see it is because I learned to say things and to ask things in a way that wasn't offensive. And just trying to be nice. And this is what this woman does. She studied Jesus. She studied. She knew enough about him to know what to say. And that shows her desperation. I had nothing like her desperation, but I knew I had to say it in the right way. And she does that. And so she's perceptive. She's wise. She understands enough about Jesus to know that here's a possible answer to my dilemma here. And so, and her child was demon possessed. And so she was desperate. You know, when you have a child that has an illness, you get that way. You just get desperate. I don't talk about our children and things that we went through with them very much because most of the story is for them to tell. And I appreciate Chelsea sharing her story with you. But the part that I can tell is when Chelsea was going through the things that she was going through, Lee and I were desperate. We went to every conventional medical doctor we could see. And then we went to the non-conventional medical doctors. And we tried a number of different people. We paid out of pocket. Didn't matter. We went into debt. You know, week by week, we would just see ourselves going deeper and deeper into debt over it. Didn't matter. Because when you have a child who has a need, those type of things, you don't think about them. You just think about how can I get an answer for this problem here. And this woman, you can see this desperation in her willingness to push through. And so when you see here, this perception, or how perceptive she was here. And she discovered that Jesus was the person to go to. And that's true. I think for all of us today, we need to realize that we can go to a lot of places for answers to our problems, but the place we have to go to is Jesus. He knows us better than we know ourselves. There's no doctor, no counselor, no advisor, no friend, no person that knows us better than Jesus. He's where we have to begin. I read this short little book. It's a thin little book. I pulled it out this week, and it's by David Head. It's entitled Shout for Joy. And he gives these little devotionals that he's written up about angels. And I love to think about angels, and sadly, I love to think about demons too. My wife doesn't like that about me, but I think about the spiritual forces of good and evil all around us, and the battles that are going on. It kind of came out in a book that I wrote called My Struggle. But anyway, I digress. Once again, I digress. David Head wrote this thing called Shout for Joy, and it says this, and he has an angel talking, and oh man, I love this so much. 10,467, 10,464, 10,393, steady, anger won't get you anywhere. 10,390, Lord, counting hairs as they fall out is the dullest of occupations. But if doing this helps this one of your anxious children to know their value in your sight, I will not begrudge the labor. By his knowledge that I count, may he know that he counts. I love that. It just talks about, God knows us better than we know ourselves. He knows the number of hair on your head. And none of us know that except for God. So we go to Jesus. Jesus has the answers. And this woman was perceptive in that way. One of my favorite songs is, "My Jesus, He can fix it." And it's got a little bit of a gospel flair to it, if you sing it right. I know, I should right now. I should just full voice. Full voice. Yeah. But my Jesus, He can fix it. And He can. But do we turn to Him? Do we have that same perception that she had? I want to call someone up now to share with us. This woman is a leader in our campus ministry, specifically here in New Jersey. She serves in the paid full-time ministry, and she has a full-time heart. Recently she was accepted into a master's program in counseling because she wants to continue to better herself, to be able to help other people. And I think that's awesome and that's fantastic. And so I'm talking about Duchana Gille. I asked Chelsea, I said, "Chelsea, if you had one thing to say about Shauna, what would you say?" And she said, "She's the best." So, Shauna, what I've noticed about you over the years is I've noticed your commitment and your dedication and your heart. I see how you love people. I see the way that, Chelsea tells me about all the people that you study the Bible with, the way that you're on campus with people, the way that you invest your heart in other people to train them and help them be their best for God. And we are really grateful and thankful to have you in the ministry and to have the heart that you have in our ministry. And so thank you for sharing with us today, and let's give it up for Shauna.
How do you not cry after that? Oh my goodness. So my name is Shauna. I've been a disciple for about 6.5 years. I did not grow up in the church. I was reached out to on campus at Montclair State University. Soon after I graduated, I went full-time into the ministry in New Jersey, and I truly love it. It's really an honor and a privilege to serve in the ministry as a single. This is just something that is so special to me. And I'm really humbled and honored to be able to share with you all today. So this woman has always stood out to me in the Gospel of Matthew and Mark. This woman had a fiery spirit that could not be quenched. She was a woman on a mission. We see that Jesus retreated to a home where he did not want to be found, but she found him. This fact alone speaks to the superpower that all women have. When we want to find something out, we find out. We have been private investigators since the beginning of time. Her approach to Jesus revealed 3 things in her character that I want to imitate in my life and want to encourage you with. This woman had great faith, humility, and courage. Amen. This foreign woman was filled with great faith. She was not a woman of God or a devout follower of our Lord. And although she was considered an outsider, that did not stop her from pursuing Jesus. Her faith convicts me and challenges me. Her faith was audacious. In Mark 7, verse 25, scripture says, as soon as she heard about him, she came and fell at his feet. I wonder what she heard about Jesus. Obviously, she heard about Jesus' power, that he could heal any disease or sickness or cast out demons. I wonder if she heard about Jesus' compassion, his loving nature, how he stood up for the marginalized and oppressed, his passion for justice, his welcoming yet challenging spirit. Whatever she heard about Jesus was enough for her to hunt him down and plead for help. This astounds me. We don't know if she, ever heard Jesus speak or was an eyewitness to the miracles he performed, but whatever she was told by word of mouth allowed her faith to develop, a faith that was bold, daring, and brave. This reminds me that I need to stay enthralled and amazed by Jesus and what he's able to do. Her faith makes me evaluate where my faith is today. And in some ways, we're similar to this woman where we've never seen Jesus or heard his voice, but we have heard his message through the word. Do we really believe that Jesus is able to do anything? The very things that we believe to be the most challenging in our lives, Jesus is more than capable of turning that situation around. She knew once Jesus was involved in her situation, the entire narrative would change. Her life and her daughter's life would be forever changed. Jesus commends her great faith. Would he commend ours? The end of the year was very difficult for me. The month of November and December felt like a nightmare. In mid-November, I just decided to pray to God to help me with trusting him with my family's salvation, their health, unforeseen circumstances, and their suffering, because I noticed that was a weakness of mine. And literally the next day, I found out that there was a possibility that my dad had cancer. My mom told me that his prostate needed to be removed and that we wouldn't know if it was cancer until they removed it. All I wanted to do was to burst into tears. I immediately felt so afraid. I felt faithless. I just expected doom and gloom. Cancer is such a scary disease, and I was tempted to question God's goodness and faithfulness to me and my family. The possibility of my dad being sick was just heartbreaking. And there was a lot of waiting in between getting clarity, waiting for the procedure to be scheduled, waiting for the scheduled date to finally come, waiting for him to come out of the recovery room, then having to wait 3 more weeks to get the test results. It just felt like an ongoing nightmare. I wondered, do I need to prepare for my dad to die? It was hard. It wasn't what I wanted to do, but I turned to God as much as I could. Many older women in the church helped me through this crazy time, and through their advice and encouragement, I decided that I wasn't going to make assumptions or draw conclusions until God revealed the facts. In my time of waiting, I decided that I want to trust God and be faithful and not freak out. I want to take the opportunity for God to refine my faith and to let Satan crush it. I wanted to believe that God caught this early enough and that my dad would be cancer-free. I read scriptures like Matthew 6, verse 30, where Jesus talks about not worrying and asks, why do you have so little faith? That convicted me. I held on to Philippians 4, verse 6, telling God what I needed and thanking him for all that he had already done. Multiple times a day, I had to make a decision about what my attitude is going to be. Am I going to take my thoughts captive today or let my mind rule me? The facts were that I knew nothing and I had no control, and I needed to be completely dependent on God. I strived to have a Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego kind of faith. My declaration to God was that God is able to allow my father to be cancer-free, but even if he doesn't, I will not bow down to any other God. I will not give up on God, and I will not succumb to Satan. Thankfully, on December 11th, we found out my dad was cancer-free. And this situation was very difficult for me emotionally, but I'm grateful for it because God tested and strengthened my faith. And I don't know where you are today or how your faith is being challenged, but I want to encourage you to allow God to increase your faith and not to allow Satan to crush it. The Syrophoenician woman had an expectant and hopeful faith that is worthy of our imitation. Secondly, this woman was humble and meek in spirit. We see it in her actions. She persistently cried out to Jesus. She begged Jesus. She knelt before Jesus. She was desperate. Nothing humbles the soul more than being in a state of desperation. In those moments, you're willing to do absolutely anything. And the situation with her daughter was dire. I'm not a mom, but I can only imagine the pain of watching your child suffer day after day. She was not afraid to look a fool in front of Jesus, the apostles, or the neighbors that could hear her shouting. She was focused on her need and not herself. And this is such a great example of humility. In Matthew 15, verse 22, we see that the woman calls out to Jesus and explains her situation, and Jesus does not respond. In fact, the disciples see her as troublesome, annoying. They speak of her as though she's something to get rid of. And if I was in this position, if I'm honest, and I knew Jesus was in the house and he wasn't answering me, I'd be really mad. I'd be tempted to give up and walk away. I would question the things that I heard about Jesus. Is he really the truth? This woman inspires me because she knows she needs help. And she knows who has the capacity to do something about her situation, so she stands her ground. She doesn't budge. She keeps crying after Jesus, yelling at the top of her lungs. Somehow we go from reading about her outside of the house crying out to having a conversation with Jesus. She pleads her way to him. And in Matthew 15, verses 24 and 26, Jesus replies, "I was sent only for the lost sheep of Israel, and it's not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." Jesus points out that she is a Gentile. Like Steve mentioned, a lot of people can think that Jesus was being rude or unkind, but if that was true, that would make Jesus a hypocrite. And we know Jesus is not a hypocrite. He treated all women with love, dignity, and respect. He proves this by the grace he extends to her at the end of the story. And I love her answer to Jesus. She's so witty and smart. She leans in and respectfully challenges Jesus a little bit. She says, "It is right, Lord. Even dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table." Instead of getting deterred, she points to the fact that she is willing to take scraps from Jesus. Her heart was, "I'll take whatever you give me, just help me. I know you weren't sent for me, but I'll settle for crumbs." I don't sense any entitlement, disrespect from her, but a humble heart genuinely searching for help. And when I read this account, I can't help but think about, where am I in my humility? Am I still desperate for Jesus? When was the last time I cried out to Jesus in my time of need? Do I resort to myself when life gets challenging, or do I go running to the feet of Jesus? And if Jesus was willing to help this woman who was not a part of the plan, how much more is Jesus willing to be there for us, his disciples? And lastly, this woman exhibited great courage and boldness. She doesn't take no for an answer. She wasn't afraid to go to Jesus, even though she was a stranger to him and a foreigner. There were so many obstacles that were before her. She had to find him. She cried out to him even though he didn't answer right away. She begged him for help. Even when he said no, she asked again. She was resilient and bold enough to tell Jesus what she desired, although common sense would say, "Don't even bother." Fear says, "Don't even ask. You'll end up disappointed." Her fear of potential rejection didn't stop her from pursuing Jesus and getting the help her daughter needed. And personally, when I'm afraid, I don't want to make a move. I'm the type of person to calculate every potential outcome before I get into a risky situation. Sometimes it can feel better to not even try than to make an attempt and be rejected. And she was bold enough to ask, although the answer might have been no. She was a woman full of courage. She makes me think about, what am I not asking Jesus for out of fear? Jesus honors her courage and faith. Lastly, in Matthew 15, verse 28, Jesus says to her, "Woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted," and her daughter was healed at that moment. Overall, this woman was passionate and motivated by the love of her daughter. She exhibited resilience and determination, and I want to strive to be a disciple that has that kind of faith. To take Jesus at his word. If he says that he is all-powerful and has all authority, then we need to believe him. We need to fight for our faith to be increased. We need to remember that Jesus is who he is in his character. He's the most loving, kind, and gentle man we will ever come to know. And I want to become a woman that is humble at heart before Jesus, never forgetting that I am always in need, whether in plenty or want or prosperity or adversity. I need Jesus. I need Jesus every single day. I can do nothing apart from him. Lastly, I'm inspired by this woman's courage and ability to not let fear dictate her actions. She displayed bravery and trust in a God she hadn't known. Her example is so worthy of our imitation. Thank you for allowing me to share.
Thank you, Shauna. That was amazing. That was awesome. And so glad that you picked this woman to share about. And you took all of my points. And so we're done for today. And good that everyone was here. She kind of did, but it's good. Sometimes repetition is good, okay? Sometimes it's good to go back over things. And so my first point was that the woman was perceptive. And my second point is that this woman is persistent. She pushes through. And Shauna did a great job talking about this idea. But let me just underscore it a little bit. when we see all the things that she did, that she pushed through in talking to Jesus, it really is pretty amazing to think about. And basically, she was the type of person that just decided, I'm not going to take no for an answer. I know that you can help, so say whatever you need to say. I need help. Help me. And I talked earlier about one of the things that you see about some of the women in the gospel is that they stood up for justice. Like the parable of the woman who, with the unjust judge, she just keeps coming back and says, you know what? I'm here again. I need justice. I need fairness. Treat me justly. And you get that sense here of this woman just saying, I'm not stopping. I'm going to be persistent. And I hope that for all of us, we have that type of pursuit of justice in our own hearts, pursuit of fairness in our own hearts, and that we will not let go of that. And that when we see injustice going on in the world around us, a lack of fairness in the world around us, we'll speak to that. And you see that definitely in the story of this woman here. It's interesting, this comment that it's not right to take the children's bread and toss it to dogs. Much has been written about that. You can read the literature about that. And there's some people, and I've even heard people sometimes in the church, even in a communion message that I remember from not that long ago, saying, when Jesus used that term and said it's not right to take the children's bread and toss it to dogs, that Jesus was talking about a little lap dog, like just a little small, cuddly, furry lap dog there. Because really, when you look at the equation of what Jesus is saying, children's bread, children of God, toss it to dogs, she's the dog in that, and she knows it. She gets that. And so to try to water it down, we try to say, the Greek word for that is it's a nice little lap dog. But that's just not the case. That's just not true. It's not talking about, the word is dog. That's the word. And that's why in the English translations, you don't see it translated as a little lap dog, because they can't do that and be right with the text. So what is Jesus getting at there? Well, as I said before, I think Jesus is pushing her. He's testing her. And there, for us to grow, we need tests. We need to be pushed through things. And so Jesus is just basically saying to her, okay, do you really want this? Do you really want this? Do you understand what you're asking for here? And she gets it, and as Shauna said, in a very witty way and also in a very perceptive way, she said, okay, I'll accept that, I'll take that, but even the dogs get the crumbs. And that's why it's not a lap dog also, because lap dogs aren't looking for crumbs. They're sitting in the lap of the master, and they're getting the food from the table, okay? And she understands he doesn't mean a lap dog. He means the dogs that scavenge after the meal for the crumbs that are left under the table. It's the same dogs that were used in the story of the rich man and Lazarus, where the dogs go under the table looking for crumbs and lick the sores of Lazarus. It's the same word, and it's the same type of dog. But she says, I'll take that. I know I'm not Jewish. I know I'm not a follower the way others are followers, but all I'm asking for is a crumb. Can you just give me a crumb? And that's pretty amazing, really, that she's willing to do that. She went through so many barriers to get to Jesus. When she approached him, at first Jesus was silent. Then the disciples say, send her away. And then Jesus politely says no to her. I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And she gets that. but she presses on. He says it's not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. She presses on, and she asks for a crumb. And finally, when she asks for a crumb, Jesus is like, okay, you get it. You have persistence here. You have persevered. Which, at that point, he talks about faith, because faith is persistent. Faith is persistent, and faith is consistent. And if we're not willing to have a persistent relationship with God and Jesus, then we have to question if we're really faithful as disciples. As someone who wants to be a disciple, we must be persistent like this woman. She pushed through all of her own excuses. Then she pushed through all of the things that were set up as barriers for her. And Jesus really did test her. He really did. And you think, well, those tests are unfair. You know, you can make that claim, but you're not God. And you have to be careful with that. It's like Job, who railed out against God, and God looked back at Job, and he said, when's the last time you made a snowflake? And he didn't really answer Job's question. He just said, I'm God and you're not. And so we have to be careful in the way that we sometimes question God. Because when we raise questions about God, whether it's in the story of Job or it's in this story, they'll come leaking out in our own lives as well. Those type of questions in which we start doubting the sovereignty of God, or doubting the love of God, or doubting God's care for us, and failing to trust in God the way that we should trust. And so we have to be careful here. It's not to say that things aren't hard as disciples. They are hard. There are tough things that come. We were going through things with our children. Man, it was hard. There were a lot of tears shed. There was a lot of just shaking the head and saying, what in the world? God, what are you doing here? Where are you? And I think the thing is, faith works through the shaking of the head and the questions and the wringing of the hands to continue to trust, even through the hard times. And that's one of the things that what Jesus is trying to show us here. Faith is persistent through the tough times. And for some of you here, you've faced really tough times in your life. For others of you, you haven't faced those tough times yet, but they will come. Something will come. And so you need to go ahead right now and have deep conviction and gain deep conviction for when those storms of life come your way. And there will be storms that will come your way. And it's not always going to be easy. Sometimes it's going to be very, very hard. I can remember at times just crying out to God and just asking him, why? Why is this happening? I don't get it, God. What's going on here? And there not being a good answer. You know, an answer didn't come back to me right away. But I just had to dig in deeper, and I had to get into the scriptures more, and I had to trust God through it all. Although it wasn't easy, I had to learn how to do that. And so you see this sort of a mini picture of that happening with this woman here. And her willingness to push through the barriers, to push through maybe her own doubts or her own dialogue with Jesus, and say, you know what, I'm still going to keep coming after you. I'm still going to ask you for an answer, which is ultimately what we all have to do at different times in our lives, and I've had to learn that as well. You know, one of the things that I've tried to help other people with when they go through tough times is I've tried to help them just to go ahead and be honest with God. You see that with Job, and I appreciate Job for that. He was honest. You see that in the Psalms. I'll talk about this a little more tomorrow. But in the Psalms, when the psalmist cries out and he says, God, where are you? That's real. And when he says, are you asleep? And that's the language. God, are you asleep? That's real. But I appreciate that honesty. And the reason, some people would think, well, that's disrespectful. But the psalmist did it. And so I don't think it's disrespectful. I think it's real. And here's the other thing I think about it. I think God is big enough to handle that. That's what I always try to tell people. You're angry right now. Don't just be angry with me, but let God know how you're really feeling. Because he can handle it. He's God. He can handle it. That's right. And so I think that this woman, I appreciate the fact that she just keeps pushing, to the point of, give me a crumb. I'll take a crumb. And one of the points that Shauna made that I really loved is she did not come to Jesus with a sense of privilege. And I think sometimes we do. And we have to be careful with that. Because we don't want the crumb. We want the whole dinner, 5-course meal. We want all of it. And we're not looking for just a crumb. And when just a crumb comes our way, be honest, we get a bit disappointed. And we get a bit of an attitude. When we've never been promised the 5-course meal, ever. And the Gospels, it's just not there. Prosperity gospel, it is there, but that's false teaching. But when you look in the Gospels, it's just not there. What you are promised, you're never promised a 5-course meal. You're promised a cross. If you're going to follow Jesus, that's what to expect, the cross. It doesn't come with the, whatever you like, shrimp, steak, dessert, all that. It's just the cross that you've been promised. And so, and I appreciate this woman for pushing through. And Jesus did test her, but she pushed through anyway. A couple other points, and I'll close. One is and Shauna mentioned this, her humility. She was so humble in just asking for the crumb. She was not at all entitled. And we have to have that type of humility when we approach Jesus as well. 1 Peter 5, verse 5 says, all of you clothe yourselves with humility toward one another, because God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's almighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Humility. We need to learn to envelop ourselves with humility and have teachable hearts. And when we approach God, approach him with humility. There's a story of a young American student who was visiting the city of Bonn, Germany, and saw the piano of which Beethoven composed much of his music. And she was a bit of a pianist herself, and so she asked the guard if she could play on it a little bit. And she, at first he was reluctant, but she offered him a tip, a nice tip, and so he agreed. And so she went over and she opened it up and she started playing on it a little bit. She played the Moonlight Sonata, and she went over to the guard after that. She says, I suppose all the greatest pianists in the world come here and they want to play. And the guard shook his head and he said, Paderewski, this great Polish pianist, said, he was just here last week, and he said he wasn't worthy to play on that piano. And that's just the difference between pride and humility. And having a sense of privilege and a sense of, I want to do this, of being surrendered to Jesus, understanding our place. Humility is important, and then the last thing is faith. This woman received such a great compliment from Jesus, and this is a compliment of faith. Woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted. This is one of the greatest compliments that we could receive in life, that we have great faith. Woman, you have great faith. Her daughter was healed, and her daughter was healed because she had great faith. And this is her legacy of faith. And I appreciate this woman so much for many, many reasons. She withstood the test. She pushed through the barriers. She got to Jesus. Her request was realized, and it was all because of her faith. And that's what Jesus recognized about her. There's so many people that Jesus met in Israel, so many people that he bumped into, but it's this one person outside of Israel, a Syrophoenician woman of Canaanite descent, who Jesus gives this tag to: you have great faith. Whatever your life is being tested right now, how is your faith being tested right now? Perhaps it's with your children. Perhaps it's with your marriage. Perhaps it's with a relationship. Perhaps it's with your job. Perhaps it's with your own ego and pride. Perhaps it's with your character. Perhaps it's with your zeal or enthusiasm. Perhaps you're just in a spiritual rut and your faith is being tested right now. Whatever it is, whatever you're facing, Jesus can help you. But we need to be persistent, and we need to be consistent, and we need to keep on going to Jesus. Here's the thing: Jesus will do his part. God will do his part. Are we willing to do ours? The Syrophoenician woman, there's so many points along the way where she would not have gotten her request granted if she just stopped. Stopped at that place, but she would not stop. I think we are so tempted to stop at times, and at times we do stop, instead of continuing to push through until we get an answer from God. And I appreciate her for that. So let's imitate her faith. Jesus said to her, you have great faith. Can we put our name in the place of the you there? And Jesus say to us, you have great faith. Amen. Amen.